Welcome to Nightmare Fuel Stories. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you enjoy the stories. Number the Hollow Men, welcome to Nightmare Fuel Stories. I've never told anyone the truth about what happened in the Argonne. Not the army brass, not the doctors at the VA, not even my own wife. They'd lock me up if I did. Hell, sometimes I think maybe I should be locked up. Maybe what I saw wasn't real. But then I remember the eyes in the dark and I know better. It was October 1918, near the end of the war. I was a sergeant with the 82nd Division, part of a platoon sent to clear German positions in the Argonne Forest. There were 23 of us when we entered those woods. I was the only one who made it out. The official report says we were caught in an artillery barrage, followed by a gas attack. That's what I told them anyway. What could I say? That things came out of the ground and took my men one by one, that I watched as they were changed. No, better they think I'm shell-shocked than insane, but I'm an old man now and I won't live much longer. The doctors say my heart is giving out. Before I go, I need someone to know the truth. Even if you don't believe me, at least I'll have said it. At least someone will have heard. We entered the forest on the morning of October 12th. The Germans had been pushed back, but intelligence suggested they'd left behind machine gun nests to slow our advance. Our orders were simple: find and eliminate any resistance, then rejoin the main force for the push toward the Meuse River. I remember how quiet it was. After weeks of constant artillery, the silence felt wrong somehow. The forest was dense, old-growth trees with a thick canopy that blocked most of the sunlight. The ground was a mess of mud and fallen leaves, with shell craters everywhere. Private Donovan was on point, good kid from Boston, barely 19. He'd been with us since July and had proven himself steady under fire. Behind him was Corporal Miller, then the rest of us spread out in a staggered line. Lieutenant Hayes was in command, but he deferred to me on tactical matters. I'd been in France longer than most of them. We'd been moving for about 3 hours when Donovan signaled for us to stop. He'd found something. I moved up to his position and he pointed to what looked like a collapsed bunker half hidden by underbrush. "German," he whispered. I studied it. The construction didn't look German. It was older, much older, with stones that seemed almost ancient. "I don't think so," I said. "Looks like some kind of old cellar or crypt. Probably belonged to a house that got shelled." Lieutenant Hayes joined us, looking at the structure with interest. "Should we check it out? Could be Germans hiding inside." I hesitated. Something about the place made my skin crawl, but I couldn't explain why. "I'll take Miller and Donovan. The rest of you set up a perimeter." Hayes nodded, and we approached the entrance. The doorway was partially collapsed, but there was enough space for a man to squeeze through. I took out my flashlight and shined it inside. Stone steps led down into darkness. "I'll go first," I said, drawing my Colt. "Miller, follow me. Donovan, watch our backs." The air inside was stale and damp, with an odd smell I couldn't place, something mineral and old, like wet stone, but with a sweetness underneath that reminded me vaguely of rotting fruit. The stairs descended about 15 feet before opening into a chamber. My flashlight revealed walls covered in strange markings, not German, not French, nothing I recognized. They seemed to be carved directly into the stone, intricate patterns that hurt my eyes if I looked at them too long. "What is this place, Sarge?" Miller whispered, his voice echoing slightly. "Some kind of old cellar, maybe," I said, though I didn't believe it. The chamber was too large, too deliberately constructed, spread out but stay within sight of each other. The chamber was roughly circular, about 30 feet across, with 3 tunnels leading off in different directions. The floor was smooth stone, worn down by what must have been centuries of use. In the center stood a stone table or altar, covered in more of those strange carvings. Miller approached the altar while Donovan and I checked the perimeter. There were niches cut into the walls, each containing what looked like clay pots or urns. "Hey, Sarge," Miller called softly. "Look at this." I joined him at the altar. He was pointing at a small metal object, about the size of a pocket watch, sitting in a depression in the stone. It was made of a dull, grayish metal I didn't recognize, etched with the same strange patterns as the walls. "Don't touch it," I warned, but Miller had already picked it up. "It's warm," he said, surprised. "And look, there's something inside." The object had a small, cloudy window on one side. When Miller tilted it toward the light, I could see something moving inside, a dark liquid that seemed to flow against gravity, swirling in patterns that matched the carvings. That was when we heard the scream from outside. We rushed back up the stairs to find chaos. Hayes was shouting orders, men were firing wildly into the trees, and Private Jenkins was on the ground, clutching his leg and screaming. "What happened?" I demanded, grabbing Hayes by the shoulder. "Something attacked Jenkins," he said, his face pale. "Came out of nowhere. We couldn't see it clearly, just a shadow moving fast." I knelt beside Jenkins. His pant leg was torn open, revealing a wound unlike anything I'd seen before. It wasn't a clean cut or a bullet hole, but a series of small, precise punctures arranged in a pattern. The skin around the wounds was already turning gray. It hurts, Sarge, Jenkins gasped. Burns like fire, get the medic, I ordered, but our medic, Private Schultz, was already there, looking bewildered as he opened his kit. I don't know what to do for this, he admitted. Never seen anything like it, I made a quick decision. We need to get back to the main force. Miller Donovan helped carry Jenkins, everyone else, defensive formation. Keep your eyes open. As Miller bent to help Jenkins, I noticed he'd slipped the metal object into his pocket. I should have made him leave it, but there wasn't time to argue. We started back the way we'd come, moving as quickly as we could while carrying Jenkins. The forest seemed different now, darker, more oppressive. The trees were the same, but something had changed. It felt like we were being watched. We'd gone perhaps half a mile when Jenkins began to convulse. We set him down, and Schultz tried to hold him still, but Jenkins' body arched and twisted with impossible strength. Foam flecked his lips and his eyes rolled back in his head. Then he went still. Schultz checked for a pulse, then looked up at me and shook his head. He's gone, he said quietly. Lieutenant Hayes cursed softly. We'll have to leave him. Mark the location on the map and we'll send a recovery team when we reach base. I nodded, though it felt wrong to leave him there. We covered his body with his own coat and continued on. Night was falling fast, and Hayes made the call to set up camp in a small clearing. We dug shallow foxholes and established a watch rotation. I took first watch with Corporal Miller. What do you think happened to Jenkins, Sarge? Miller asked as we huddled in our foxhole, scanning the darkening woods. I don't know, I admitted. Could have been some new German weapon. Gas can do strange things to the body. Miller shook his head. Didn't look like gas. And what about that place we found, those markings? They weren't German. No, I agreed. They weren't. Miller was quiet for a moment, then reached into his pocket and pulled out the metal object. In the fading light, the liquid inside seemed to glow faintly. I think this is important, he said. I think it's connected to what happened. Before I could respond, we heard a sound from the direction of Jenkins' body, a wet, tearing noise followed by a soft thump. I raised my hand for silence and listened. Nothing but the normal sounds of the forest at night, wind in the leaves, distant artillery, the occasional cry of a night bird. Stay here, I whispered to Miller. Wake the lieutenant if I'm not back in 5 minutes. I crept through the underbrush toward where we'd left Jenkins, my Colt drawn. The moon was up now, providing just enough light to see by. When I reached the spot, I found Jenkins' coat lying on the ground, empty. His body was gone. Then I saw the tracks, not boots, not even human feet, but long, narrow impressions like the feet of some enormous insect leading away into the forest. And beside them, drag marks, as if Jenkins' body had been pulled along. I followed the tracks for about 20 yards before my nerve failed me. Something moved in the darkness ahead, something tall and thin that didn't move like a man. I caught a glimpse of gleaming eyes, too many eyes, and then it was gone. I returned to Miller and reported what I'd seen, trying to keep my voice steady. He listened without interrupting, his face growing paler by the second. We need to tell the lieutenant, he said when I finished. We woke Hayes and told him everything. He listened skeptically but agreed to break camp and move out immediately. No one argued. We were all on edge, jumping at shadows. We marched through the night, following our compass. The forest seemed to close in around us, branches reaching like fingers, roots rising to trip our feet. Twice we heard movement in the underbrush, and once a high, keening cry that might have been a wounded animal, or might have been something else entirely. Dawn found us exhausted but alive, having covered several miles. Hayes called a brief halt to check our position against the map. We should reach the main force by noon, he said, though he didn't sound convinced. According to the map, we should have already encountered American patrols. We continued on, the forest growing thicker and darker despite the rising sun. The trees here were different, older, twisted into strange shapes, their bark black and rough like burned flesh. Around mid-morning, Private Schultz disappeared. 1 minute he was there, bringing up the rear of our column, the next he was gone. We backtracked, calling his name as loudly as we dared, but found nothing, no signs of a struggle, no blood, no tracks. It was as if he'd simply vanished. Hayes ordered us to tighten formation and keep moving. No one was to be alone, not even for a moment. We marched in pairs, back to back, weapons ready. By what should have been noon, the forest was as dark as twilight. The canopy above had grown so thick that barely any sunlight penetrated, and the trees were wrong. Their trunks were too smooth, too regular, almost like columns. The branches interlaced overhead in patterns that reminded me of the carvings in the underground chamber. This isn't right, Lieutenant Hayes muttered, studying his map and compass for the 100th time. We should have reached the line hours ago. I think we're going in circles, Corporal Miller said quietly to me. Look at that rock formation. We passed it before. He was right. We'd been here before, though how long ago I couldn't say. Time seemed to work differently in this place. Lieutenant, I said, I think we need to consider the possibility that we're lost. Hayes looked up from his map, his face haggard. That's not possible. I've been following the compass precisely. Let me see that, I said, holding out my hand for the compass. He handed it over and I immediately saw the problem. The needle was spinning wildly, never settling on a direction. It's useless, I said, showing it to him. Something's interfering with it. Hayes stared at the compass, then at the surrounding forest. For the first time, I saw fear in his eyes. What do we do? He asked, and I realized he was deferring to me completely now. The chain of command was breaking down. We need high ground, I decided. If we can get above the trees, maybe we can spot landmarks, get our bearings. We changed direction, heading toward a rise in the terrain that might offer a better vantage point. The going was slow, the ground becoming increasingly rocky and treacherous. Strange fungi grew in the shadows, pale and tumescent, some as large as a man's head. We were halfway up the slope when we heard the first scream. It came from behind us, where Privates Wilson and Garcia were bringing up the rear. Hayes signaled a halt, and we turned to see Garcia standing alone, his rifle aimed at something in the trees. "Wilson," he was shouting. "Wilson, where are you?" I ran back to him, the others following. "What happened?" I demanded. "Something took him," Garcia said, his voice shaking. We were right there, and then something reached out from between the trees. It wasn't a hand, Sarge, it wasn't human. It grabbed him and pulled him in, and he was just gone. I looked where he was pointing. The trees stood close together, but not so close that a man couldn't pass between them. There was no sign of Wilson, no blood, no disturbance in the leaf litter. "Did you see what it was?" Hayes asked. Garcia shook his head. "Just a shape, tall and thin, and there were eyes, so many eyes." A chill ran down my spine. I'd seen those eyes in the dark. "We keep moving," I said firmly. "Stay together, no one goes near the trees." We continued up the slope, now in a tight cluster, everyone facing outward with weapons ready. The forest had gone completely silent, no birds, no insects, not even the sound of wind in the leaves. Near the top of the rise, we found a clearing dominated by a single massive oak tree. Its trunk was easily 15 feet in diameter, its branches spreading like a canopy over the entire clearing. Unlike the other trees, this one seemed normal, healthy, ancient, but natural. "We'll rest here," Hayes decided. 15 minutes, then we continue. The men sank to the ground, grateful for the break. I remained standing, studying our surroundings. From here, I could see farther into the forest, and what I saw made my blood run cold. The trees weren't random. They formed patterns, concentric circles radiating outward from our position, with straight lines connecting them like the spokes of a wheel. It was too regular, too deliberate to be natural. "Miller," I called softly. "Come look at this." He joined me at the edge of the clearing, and I pointed out the pattern. His face went pale. "It's like the carvings," he whispered. "In that chamber." He pulled out the metal object again. The liquid inside was moving more vigorously now, swirling and pulsing with a light of its own. "I think it's leading us somewhere," he said, "or leading something to us." Before I could respond, there was a commotion from the other side of the clearing. Private Donovan was on his feet, pointing his rifle at the massive oak. "There's something inside it," he was saying, his voice high with panic. I saw it move. Hayes tried to calm him down. "It's just a tree, Donovan." "You're exhausted seeing things." "No," Donovan insisted. "Look at the bark, it's changing." We all looked. At first, I saw nothing unusual, just rough bark, deeply furrowed with age. Then I noticed a section near the base that seemed different, smoother, almost like skin. As we watched, the bark rippled as if something beneath it was moving. A seam appeared, running vertically up the trunk, widening slowly like an opening eye. "Get back," I ordered, raising my rifle. Everyone back away slowly. The seam continued to widen, revealing darkness within. Then something emerged, a tendril, pale and glistening, about as thick as a man's arm. It probed the air, bending this way and that as if tasting it. Donovan fired. The shot was deafening in the enclosed space of the clearing. The tendril jerked back, dark fluid spurting from the wound. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the entire tree shuddered. The seam split wider, revealing not wood inside, but something wet and red. More tendrils emerged, dozens of them, whipping through the air with frightening speed. "Run," Hayes shouted, and we did, scrambling back down the slope. I heard Donovan scream behind me. I turned to see him lifted off the ground, tendrils wrapped around his arms and legs, pulling him toward the opening in the tree. Hayes and 2 others were firing at the tendrils, but for every one they severed, 2 more appeared. I raised my rifle to help, but before I could fire, Donovan was pulled into the opening. The last I saw of him was his face, contorted in a silent scream, and then he was gone, swallowed by the darkness within the tree. The tendrils withdrew, and the seam began to close. Hayes and the others backed away, still firing until their rifles clicked empty. "Fall back," Hayes ordered, his voice hoarse. Now, we retreated down the slope, not stopping until we reached the bottom. Of our original 23 men, only 12 remained. Hayes looked at me, his eyes wild. "What the hell was that? What's happening here?" I had no answer for him. Nothing in my experience had prepared me for this. We were facing something beyond understanding, beyond the realm of normal warfare. Miller approached, the metal object clutched in his hand. It was glowing brightly now, the liquid inside churning violently. "I think I understand," he said quietly. "This forest, it's not just a forest, it's alive, conscious, and we woke it up when we entered that chamber." "That's insane," Hayes said, but without conviction. "After what we'd just seen, nothing seemed insane anymore. The markings," Miller continued, "they're a language. I've been studying them through this." He held up the object. "It's showing me things. This forest was here long before humans. It was worshipped by the people who built that chamber. They made sacrifices to it." "Sacrifices," I repeated, not wanting to understand. Miller nodded grimly. "Human sacrifices. The forest feeds on them, incorporates them. That's what happened to Jenkins, to Wilson, to Donovan. They're part of it now." As if in response to his words, we heard a sound from the forest around us, a low, moaning cry that might have been the wind, except there was no wind. It rose and fell almost like speech, and within it I thought I could hear voices I recognized. Jenkins, Schultz, Wilson, Donovan, calling our names. "We need to get out of here," Hayes said, his voice cracking. "Now." Before dark, we set off again, moving as quickly as we dared through the increasingly dense undergrowth. The forest seemed to be closing in around us, the trees growing closer together, branches intertwining overhead to block out what little light remained. The voices followed us, always just out of sight. Sometimes they called for help, other times they whispered terrible promises of what awaited us when we joined them. As dusk approached, we reached a small stream. Hayes decided to follow it, reasoning that it must lead somewhere, perhaps out of the forest entirely. We waded through the shallow water, hoping to throw off whatever was tracking us. The water was cold and oddly viscous, clinging to our boots and legs. After a few hundred yards, Private Cooper stopped suddenly, crying out in pain. "Something bit me," he gasped, reaching down into the water. When he pulled his hand back up, his fingers were gone, cleanly severed at the knuckles. He stared at the stumps in shock as blood poured from the wounds. "Get out of the water," I shouted, but it was too late. The surface of the stream erupted as creatures burst forth, pale, eel-like things with circular mouths ringed with teeth. They attached themselves to Cooper, who screamed and thrashed as they burrowed into his flesh. We fired into the water, killing several of the creatures, but there were too many. Cooper fell, disappearing beneath the surface in a froth of blood and churning water. We scrambled up the bank, firing behind us as more of the ill things pursued us onto land. They moved with surprising speed, undulating across the ground like snakes. One latched onto Private Mercer's leg before Corporal Miller crushed it with his boot. We ran blindly through the forest, no longer following any plan, just trying to escape. Night was falling fast, and with it came new horrors. The trees themselves began to move, trunks bending and twisting to block our path. Roots erupted from the ground, reaching for our ankles. And all around us the voices grew louder, more insistent. "Join us, Sergeant," they called, using my name now. "Become part of something greater. It doesn't hurt, not for long." One by one, men fell behind. Lieutenant Hayes was taken when a branch speared through his chest, lifting him into the canopy where something waited in the darkness. Corporal Rodriguez simply vanished between one step and the next, there and then gone without a sound. By midnight, only Miller and I remained, huddled in the hollow of a fallen log while shapes moved in the darkness outside. The metal object in Miller's hand pulsed with light, growing brighter by the minute. "It's calling them," I realized. "That thing is drawing them to us." Miller nodded wearily. "I know, I've known for hours, but I can't let it go. It won't let me." He held up his hand. The metal had somehow fused with his flesh, the strange patterns now etched into his skin, glowing with the same light as the liquid inside. "You need to go," he said quietly. "I'll draw them away. Maybe you can find a way out." "I'm not leaving you," I insisted. Miller smiled sadly. "You don't have a choice, Sarge. Look." He pulled back his sleeve. The patterns had spread up his arm, covering it completely. As I watched, his skin began to ripple and change, becoming something else, something like bark, but smoother, wetter. "It's too late for me," he said, "but not for you. Someone has to tell the truth about this place." Before I could stop him, he crawled out of our hiding place and ran into the forest, the light from his transformed hand blazing like a beacon. I heard them following him, crashes through the underbrush, that same wet, tearing sound I'd heard when Jenkins was taken. Miller screamed once, a sound cut off abruptly. Then silence, except for the voices, now singing in triumph. I waited until dawn, not daring to move. When the first light filtered through the canopy, I emerged from the log and began walking, choosing a direction at random and sticking to it. The forest seemed different in the morning light, just trees and underbrush, no sign of the horrors of the night before. No moving trunks, no grasping roots, no pale tendrils reaching from within. But I knew better than to trust appearances now. I walked all day without stopping, eating nothing, drinking only from my canteen. By late afternoon, I saw something ahead that made my heart leap, a break in the trees, sunlight streaming through. I approached cautiously, expecting a trap, but it was real, the edge of the forest. Beyond lay open fields, and in the distance, the ruins of a village where I could see American troops moving. I was almost there, just steps from freedom, when I heard it one last time, the voice now directly behind me. "Sergeant," it said, in a perfect imitation of Miller's voice, "wait for me." I turned slowly. Miller stood there, or something wearing Miller's face. It looked almost right, the uniform, the build, the features, but the eyes were wrong, too dark, too deep, with something moving behind them. "Come back with me," it said, holding out a hand that was still mostly human. "We found something wonderful, something that will end the war, you just have to see it." I raised my rifle. "You're not Miller," I said. It smiled, and the smile went too wide, splitting the face in a way no human face could split. "No," it agreed, the voice changing, becoming a chorus of all the men I'd lost. "But we remember him. We remember all of them. And we'll remember you too." I fired, the bullet taking it squarely in the chest. It staggered back but didn't fall. Where blood should have been, a thick, dark sap oozed from the wound. I fired again and again, emptying my rifle. The thing that wasn't Miller jerked with each impact but kept coming, its form beginning to shift and change, the human disguise falling away to reveal something tall and thin, with too many limbs and too many eyes. I threw down my empty rifle and ran, sprinting for the edge of the forest. Behind me I heard it give chase, moving fast through the underbrush. The sunlight was just ahead, open ground just steps away. I pushed myself harder, lungs burning, legs screaming with effort. Something wrapped around my ankle, a root, a tendril I didn't look to see, and I fell, sprawling in the dirt just yards from the forest's edge. I clawed at the ground, trying to pull myself forward as it dragged me back. My hand closed around a rock, and I twisted, smashing it against the thing holding my ankle. There was a sound like breaking glass, and suddenly I was free. I scrambled to my feet and ran the final distance, bursting out of the trees into the blessed sunlight of the open field. Behind me, the forest went silent. When I finally found the courage to look back, there was nothing there, just trees, dark and still. American soldiers found me an hour later, delirious with exhaustion and fear. They took me to a field hospital where I told my story of German artillery and gas attacks. What else could I say? That was 70 years ago. I've lived a long life since then, married, had children, grandchildren. I've never returned to France, never set foot in another forest. I keep to open spaces where I can see the sky. Sometimes I dream of them, my men, moving through the trees with strange, fluid grace, their bodies transformed into something no longer human. They call my name, tell me they're waiting. Miller is always at the front, holding out that metal object, now part of his flesh. "It's your turn, Sergeant," he says. "We've saved a place for you." I wake from these dreams drenched in sweat, the smell of wet earth and rotting leaves thick in my nostrils. And sometimes, just sometimes, I find dirt under my fingernails, though I haven't gardened in years. The doctors say my heart is failing. I don't have long now. In my weaker moments, I wonder if death will really be an escape, or if they'll be waiting for me on the other side, my men, my responsibility, the ones I left behind. I wonder if the forest is still there, still hungry. I wonder if it's spreading, patient and ancient, one tree at a time. And sometimes, when the wind blows just right, I think I can hear them calling.